By mid-October 1939, the war had shifted from intense land campaigns, such as the invasion of Poland, to strategic naval operations in the Atlantic. On October 13th, the German Navy, Kriegsmarine, delivered a blow to the British Royal Navy, underscoring the growing threat posed by German U-boats. At the same time, diplomatic tensions continued to rise in Europe as both sides prepared for broader conflict, and the international community took stock of the war's potential expansion. Military events, the U-boat threat and the attack on HMS Royal Oak. On October 13, 1939, Captain Lieutenant Gunther Prien of the German submarine U-47 was carrying out a daring and highly successful mission. Prien's orders were to infiltrate Scapa Flow, one of the most secure and vital anchorages of the British Royal Navy. Scapa Flow, located in the Orkney Islands, had been a key naval base for Britain during both World Wars. Despite its extensive defenses, which included submarine nets and patrols, a critical vulnerability was identified by the Germans in the form of a gap in the block ships at Kirk Sound. Navigating through these narrow, dangerous waters, Prien and his crew managed to penetrate the defenses undetected, a feat that was considered nearly impossible at the time. On the night of October 13th, they successfully maneuvered U-47 into position. Although Prien's initial torpedoes failed to do significant damage, he persisted and fired another salvo. Shortly after midnight, on October 14th, HMS Royal Oak, a British battleship, was struck by 3 torpedoes, which caused catastrophic damage. The ship began sinking rapidly, and approximately 833 British sailors perished in one of the most significant naval disasters for the British Navy at that stage of the war. Prien's successful raid on Royal Oak sent shockwaves through Britain, demonstrating that even its most secure naval strongholds were vulnerable to German U-boat attacks. This event greatly boosted German morale, especially at a time when much of the world viewed the German Navy as secondary to Britain's naval power. Prien was celebrated as a national hero in Germany, and the success of this mission gave the Kriegsmarine, particularly its U-boat division, newfound prestige. Diplomatic and geopolitical developments. Tensions escalate. While the U-boat attack on Scapa Flow dominated military discussions, diplomatic tensions continued to simmer across Europe. The establishment of the general government in occupied Poland a day earlier had solidified Nazi Germany's control over Eastern Europe, drawing further international condemnation. At the same time, German preparations for further military actions in Western Europe were underway, particularly as Hitler's proposed peace talks with Britain and France had been firmly rejected earlier in the month. The French, still behind their Maginot Line, and the British Expeditionary Force in France, continued to prepare for an expected German offensive. In Finland, concerns over Soviet territorial demands were escalating, which would soon lead to the Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, the increased U-boat presence signaled the beginning of what would be a long and destructive Battle of the Atlantic, with British and Allied merchant shipping targeted as part of Germany's strategy to cut off Britain's vital supply lines. International reactions and media coverage. The British press, shocked by the audacity of the attack on Scapa Flow, covered the loss of HMS Royal Oak extensively. Newspapers like the Times and the Daily Telegraph focused on the implications of the U-boat threat, urging the government to reassess naval defense strategies and to bolster measures against submarine attacks. The attack underscored the urgent need for improved anti-submarine warfare tactics. In Germany, Prien's mission was widely celebrated. Nazi propaganda hailed the sinking of Royal Oak as a triumph of German naval prowess, and Prien himself was awarded the Knight's Cross by Hitler. German newspapers were filled with praise for the Kriegsmarine and the U-boat divisions, boosting morale at a time when the war's future course was still uncertain. In the United States, where isolationist sentiment remained strong, the attack on Royal Oak raised concerns about the vulnerability of naval forces, even for a powerful nation like Britain. While the U.S. was not yet involved in the conflict, the increasing frequency of German submarine attacks in the Atlantic began to shift public opinion regarding the possibility of American involvement in the future. Projections. The impact of October 13th on the future of the war. The events of October 13, 1939, marked a significant turning point in the naval aspect of World War II. The success of Prien's mission demonstrated the deadly effectiveness of the U-boat campaign, foreshadowing the intense naval warfare that would dominate the Atlantic in the coming years. Britain's vulnerability at Scapa Flow also exposed the need for greater vigilance and innovation in naval defense. Looking ahead, the increased U-boat activity in the Atlantic would force the Allies to develop more sophisticated anti-submarine warfare tactics, including the use of convoys, sonar, and depth charges. As Germany continued its aggressive expansion in Europe, the war would soon spread beyond the continent, engulfing even more nations in its wake. The sinking of HMS Royal Oak was just one early sign of how destructive the war at sea would become.